Right, okay. Can everybody see the presentation okay?
Yep.
Yep, okay, right.
That's perfect. Thanks, Lisa. If you could go on to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, so what you've got in front of you now is our plan for this session. So these are all the things we hope to cover in the next 2 hours. You can see we're planning on cramming quite a lot in, so we'll rattle through it at quite a pace. But as I say, there is time for questions, and if there's anything you don't understand, please just speak up at any point. We've built in a short break midway through the session because obviously we're doing quite a lot of talking. You've got quite a lot of information to take in, and we want to ensure that we don't overload you. So we'll break for a short coffee break after we've done the first sort of part of this. If I can ask you to go on to the next slide, Lisa. Okay, so as you're aware, the government announced its plan for what it's calling its roadmap out of lockdown back in February. And obviously since then there's been various dates that have come and gone as we sort of proceed through that roadmap. There were some dates that are specifically obviously going to affect community buildings. So the first of those was that they could reopen for some limited activities from the 12th of April, but for the most part, community buildings are still closed until the 17th of May, which is the earliest possible date that step 3 will come into force. And Lisa's going to talk very shortly about the different steps and the different dates that they will come into force. But I think the important thing that I was trying to convey with this slide is that the government has been very clear that the roadmap is completely dependent on 4 conditions continuing to be met. And I'm sure if you listen to Boris the other night, you'll have seen that they focus quite heavily on the fact that those 4 conditions are being met, and that's why we've been able to move to step 2. So that's where we are at the moment. Lisa's going to now talk us through the first couple of steps, and then we can obviously see if you've got any questions at that point.
So we're going to start by looking back at where we've already been. So up to this point, community facilities could only be used for the exempt activities. And I think we're all quite familiar with that now. That's blood donor sessions, food bank distribution, support groups. And of course, we now know that elections also fall into those exempt activities. So polling stations, absolutely okay for that activity to take place on the 6th of May. At the beginning of March, schools reopened, and that allowed schools to use our community facilities. So the second slide here, just covering what's already happened. So 29th of March, things have expanded a little bit further, and we've got a list now of outdoor activities that can take place. The rule of 6 mentioned on this slide, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, because the questions I'm getting asked by village halls at the moment is causing a little bit of confusion about what that means in practice, especially now government have actually added to that rule of 6. One thing I'd just like to say about this slide, I think making use of outdoor space is really great if you've got it for your community centre, because it's going to add a way of slowly introducing people back to your community, into your community facility. So if you have got that space, think about how you could potentially use that for some of your groups, especially now the weather's starting to get better. Preparation for reopening, you're allowed to show prospective hirers around your village hall from this point. So if you are getting inquiries, you can show people around if they want to see your facility, to see what your facility can offer them as we start to open up further. But remember that social distancing measures apply, and face masks must be worn at all times while you're doing that. But you can have people coming in to look around. Okay, so now another question that I've been asked is the use of toilet facilities. So while you're using the outdoor space, yes, people can use your public facilities if you want to make them available. But you don't have to. The guidance is quite clear about, you know, these are not public toilets, so you don't have to make them available. But if it's something that you wanted to do because you felt that by using the outdoor space, you know, it is going to be much easier for these groups to just have access to one toilet, then you could do that. We would strongly advise making it very clear to the hirer on the procedure that you would expect them to follow if they are using your facilities. And, you know, that may include a one in, one out system that you want to set up. What you want to avoid is people causing queues in corridors and pinch point areas in your building. So if you can, you know, have the hirer work on the principle that it is one in, one out, that would make the situation much better for your facility and for them as users of your facility. Ensure, of course, that you've got plenty of hot water and soap available, hand sanitizer at the entrance and exit points, and of course, again, face masks must be worn at all times when people are entering the facility. And all other areas of your building should remain closed to the public at that time. So there might be limitations around you making your public toilets available to the hirer, simply because you can't block off other areas. But if you can do it, it's something certainly worth considering, especially when you've got small groups like, you know, the Brownies and the Cubs. You know, they're the sorts of groups that may need access to your toilet facilities if they're going to use your outdoor areas. Okay, so we've looked back at where we've been, and now we can start looking at step 2. I think there's quite a lot of excitement about the 12th of April and the possibilities that's going to offer us as communities to start getting back to a little bit more normality. Only the activities shown over the next 2 slides that I've got here are ones that are permitted in stage 2. Other activities such as art classes, clubs, WIs, craft groups, they're not permitted yet. So this is very restricted set of activities that can go on at this stage. But I still think there is opportunity for village halls to make the most of it. Always check with your hiring group or tutor to see if they have a governing body or an umbrella group, to see what guidance is being set out by that governing body, that umbrella group, because many of them are offering very clear advice to their tutors and leaders about how they expect their protocols to be laid down during this stage, and how they can keep their groups COVID secure. So I can give you one example. I've heard that the Brownies are advising their leaders to stick to smaller groups, so no more than 15 young people in a group. So what you might get a request from the Brownies to say that actually we've got a very large pack, so could we have multiple bookings so that we can accommodate less people in each session, but so we can make it inclusive so everybody can come along. They might want to have several back-to-back bookings. So it really is worth talking to the hirers about, you know, what advice are you getting from your governing body, and how can we support you to make your activities, you know, happen and take place. In the coming weeks, you may also find that you've got an increase of inquiries around wakes and weddings. I think some of this might stem from the fact that restaurants and hotels are still not open at this stage. So you might find that there is an increase in this area. And, you know, it is about, these will be small gatherings. I've put the numbers on the slide there. No large weddings, wedding receptions up to 15 people only. And this would only be permitted as an outdoor reception with a sit-down meal. So it's still very, very restrictive. But you would have to ensure that your venue is COVID secure and that there was clearly no dancing. So I mean, this is a recent change in the guidance. This was only issued on the 25th of February, and they're saying that marquees with two sides can be permitted to be put up at halls. You have to have, you know, obviously two sides open. But again, if you've got outdoor space, this is something that you can make your building available for the you know, for the community over. Children's parties. I think this is going to be a challenging one for many halls. It's been confirmed that children's parties with a maximum of 15 adults can be held indoors, and that can take place as from the 12th of April. If you have something like a children's entertainer or some you know, children's activity host there, that person would be included in the head count. So you do need to be quite strict on the number count for people. And again, as we'll run through all of this, the venue must be COVID secure, and you must ensure that social distancing rules apply. So you need to be really clear with the hirers what you expect them, you know, to do and how they manage the event. Lastly, very quick point on the last element on the slide there. When you've got parent and toddler groups, the maximum of 15 that can attend, so your head count would be of adults and not of children. So I'll give you just a very quick example there. A mother might book to attend and she'll come along with a 2-year-old child and a babe in arms. So you would only count the adults and not count the children in that maximum number of 15. Okay, so next slide. So still looking at the 12th of April, really important to remember at this point that indoor events that bring people together, even if they do not mix with other households, you must not accept any bookings that involve people and, you know, the people coming together. That's reserved for step 3. So in other words, after the 17th of May. So still at this stage, the only exemptions in this area will be the support groups, because they always fell into the exempt list, and supervised activities for children and parent and child groups. It's also been expanded here to communal worships, okay, and obviously we've talked about the wedding receptions and the life events. So that's all okay, but other than that, you can't have events that are bringing people together. So the social contact rules continue to apply in all settings at this stage. So social distancing must be maintained. There must be no indoor mixing allowed between different households. And if you intend to hold any outdoor events such as car boot sales or outdoor markets, we would absolutely recommend that you check with your local authority to make sure that you don't need any additional licenses to cover these activities. We understand that local authorities will be issued further guidance from government, and that will be enhanced guidance in terms of how to manage outdoor events in a COVID secure manner. So if you are getting requests and you've got a large outdoor space that you can make available for outdoor markets and car boot sales, do check with your local authority first, just to make sure that they are happy that the event goes ahead and whether they have any additional guidance that they can offer you. We've been asked several times about exercise groups and if these can be held outside after the 12th of April. And obviously we've talked about the use of toilets, so you could make the toilets available. And yes, exercise groups in an external space, you know, again, it's a great way of getting people back to your facility, albeit that they're using the outside area. Clearly, you'd still have to observe the hand, face and space principles. But, you know, it's another way of getting the local yoga teacher and Pilates teacher and boot camp, you know, active again within your setting if you have that space. Libraries can open again as of the 12th of April. So if you've got a mini library or a book drop in your facility, that activity again can take place. And likewise, if you've got, you know, retailers can obviously reopen. So if you've got any indoor markets, craft fairs, providing they are COVID secure activities, these activities can take place again. Okay, so I'll hand back to Alison.
Okay, so before we go on to look at steps 3 and 4, which are still some way away, I think what's clear from what Lisa said so far is that, you know, from the 12th of April, it is possible that you're going to get people wanting to conduct some indoor activities in your halls, and those activities, as Lisa has described, really around things for children. It's very clear that sort of organised activities for children can take place, and also children's parties. So it's about, you know, now it's about you considering what you need to do to prepare your hall to reopen if you want to accept those bookings. So this slide sums up some of the things we think that you need to just sort of be starting to think about now, if you like, and we're going to come on and look at each of these in detail. So the first one that we're going to look at is understanding the rule of 6, because that's quite fundamental for how activities are going to operate going forwards for the foreseeable future. So Lisa, if you'd like to go on to the next slide. And I think you're going to start to talk through the rule of 6.
I'm going to start on this one. Yeah, this is challenging, I think, for all of us. And the government have, helpfully, unhelpfully, I'm not quite sure which camp I'm sitting on this one at the moment, but they've updated the rule of 6 so that you now have the option to include, it's the rule of 6 or 2 households coming together. And the 2 households coming together can be larger than 6 people. So we need to remember that the management committee is responsible for ensuring that, that when you're hiring out, that you're setting the room up so that you meet the rule of 6 guidance. And I just want to stress at this point that it is not the trustees and the volunteers or event or organisers to manage individuals' behaviour or to challenge groups during an event. So the government have been quite clear on that. Equally, organisers of activities are not required to inquire about anybody's household arrangements or to challenge people when they're arriving together. So if you saw a group of, let's say 12 people arriving at the door and they said that they were 2 households of 6, you're not in a position that you should challenge that. You would have to accept that is what they're telling you. They're 2 households of 6. But then we've got this challenging element, which is about we are supposed to be doing our best to avoid people mingling. So I don't envy you. It is a complex. I think this is going to be a complex area. And we just need to manage it as best we can. I think from the trustees' perspective, it's about ensuring that you're setting the room up, that you're allowing for the rule of 6, and then is for people's behaviour to ensure that they are avoiding the mixing and mingling element. So think about event planning and how that's going to be managed, which may be complex under these rules. So I think that booking secretaries are going to, and obviously if you've got caretakers to set out, it's about the information and knowledge that you can get from the hirer about how the event will play out. What exactly do they want at their event? How will the social distancing element be managed? And if they've got a booking system is going to make life much easier, because you will have an idea of the number of people that are coming as a family group and the likely setup in terms of how many people you want around a table. So the government are actually saying that at an event, people are advised to limit social interactions with anybody outside the group that they attend with. So what you need to do is think about your room space, think about your capacity, setting out the tables. So if you think of it as, we'll use the principle of people sitting around a table. So the tables need to be 2 meters apart. And when people are allocated their table, I'll give you some examples actually, which might be an easy way of explaining it. But making sure that the tables are 2 meters apart, and that people, once they're allocated their tables, the movement around the room is kept to a minimum. Okay, so I think it's probably a good time for, let me think about just talk you through a couple of scenarios. So if you've got, as we're kind of moving forward to the 17th of May, if you've got a yoga class, for example, or a Pilates class booked, I kind of think that this is a fairly logical one, because you can set the mats out at 2 meter distances. Generally, people turn up as individuals to these classes. So they'd arrive wearing their masks, they'd set their mat out at their designated spot. Once they're on their mat, they would do their class, they can remove their mask. If they need to get up to go to the toilet or go to the kitchen, and when they leave, put the mask back on. So individuals arriving, socially distancing at all times, and they can do the class and go. So that's fairly straightforward. I think it's more complex when you've got, for example, a Zumba class, a line dancing class, boot camp, all of these things where people are moving about. And I think talking to the tutors is absolutely essential about how they will manage their social distancing aspect throughout those classes, where you've got people moving about. If you've got people sitting on the, if they've split the class, people sitting on the sidelines, making sure that those people are socially distancing while they're waiting to have their changeover time to participate. So I think I'm reiterating quite a bit here, but it is that that conversation you have with a hirer to fully understand how these social distancing measures will be managed. The other example that I can think of, which is probably quite common in terms of village halls, is the kind of the classic coffee morning scenario. And if you think about previously, you historically have had around about 25 people turning up to your coffee morning each week. Based on your previous numbers, you can assume that you probably want to set out 5 or 6 tables, depending, of course, on your hall's COVID capacity restrictions. So, as I mentioned earlier, making sure each of those tables are spaced at a 2 meter distance is really important. Making sure that you've got no more than 6 chairs round a table. The complexity is going to come in when you've got the 2 household scenarios, but generally they're not going to turn up to a coffee morning, I wouldn't have thought. So work on the principle of up to 6 people sitting round a table. You should allow for the fact that some people might not want to sit on a large table with other people. They might want to, somebody's come along with their friend, and they might just want to sit with their friend on a much smaller table. So again, it's knowing your knowing the people who come along to your coffee morning and how you can accommodate them so that they will be happy in terms of where they sit. So everybody would arrive in a socially distanced manner to the event, and once seated at their tables, people then form a group, so a group of up to 6 people. And what you're trying to achieve is that group of 6 people is socially distanced from everybody else in the room. So no interchanging of groups. Once you've got your 6, that's the 6 that you would stay to the entire event with. Refreshments, it's advised that refreshments are served at the table, because what you're trying to do is keep the movement around the room to a minimum. So, if you might even want to do it, depending on how many people you've got there, it's about managing almost the, people moving around, wanting to go to the kitchen, wanting to go to the toilet. You don't want to have queues. You don't want to have lots of people in pinch points in your building. So trying to minimize the movement is essential. So we're suggesting that food and drink served to the table, but again, that's going to depend very much on your staffing capacity and also, volunteers, if you're relying on volunteers to do it. But these are the kind of things you need to keep in your head. It's about minimizing the movement around the room and trying to keep people into their groups of 6 as much as possible. This doesn't mean that people can't wave across the room at people that they know and say hello across the room and things like that. They haven't got to ignore people, but it is that once you're kind of allocated your grouping of 6 is that you would try and stay with that group of 6 throughout the event. The other thing to consider around COVID rules is if you think about a quiz night, everybody has pens and paper and swapping the pieces of paper around for scoring. You wouldn't obviously be able to do that. So thinking through your event to minimise the amount of sharing that goes on is really important too. So if you're doing a quiz night or something similar, make sure that people are bringing their own pens, paper if possible, and then if you're marking your answers, you're going to have trust and mark your own answers, because you don't want all of that exchanging of paperwork. So just a quick sum up, this is quite a complex area. The important principle of the rule of 6 means that people cannot mingle and mix in groups of more than 6 or of 2 households. It may help to think of it in pubs and restaurants and how people would interact in those spaces. So, where people are seated in a group of no more than 6 or 2 households, and they wouldn't be allowed to mix with other tables in that restaurant. So it might help you to have that kind of comparison when thinking through events. So just thinking about this 2 households coming together. So for example, you might have a family of 4 coming to an event and a family of 3 coming to an event. Well, of course, that would make 7. So that is kind of breaking your rule of 6 in that sense. So I'll just going back to what I said earlier about booking, it's really important that if you are holding events to have an idea of if people are coming along in couples, or if you're going to have this scenario of where you've got a family of 4 and a family of 3 coming along, because then obviously you're going to have to allow for additional seating to make sure that those kind of number crunching issues work. I hope that was fairly clear. It is just such a complex area. I'll hand back to Alison.
Okay, we can obviously, if anybody's got any questions around that rule of 6, we'll happily take those when we come to the sort of the question break. As Lisa says, it is complicated, but there are the 2 scenarios that you can now sort of think about when you're having those discussions with your hirers. It really is about, how are the people who are attending that event, in what sort of format are they likely to arrive at your building? Are they coming as couples? Are they coming as individuals? Are they coming as families? And then you can work out, how the rules apply based on how people are going to attend the event. There have been some questions coming in on the chat whilst Lisa's been talking. I have answered those as best we can. There's one just come in. Sorry, there's one just come in, I think, from Helen at the William Collins Centre. If we have a toddler group with 15 adults and then they bring under 5s with them, this would exceed our risk assessed maximum of 30 in the hall. Does this matter? No, in that instance it doesn't. It's the adults that you're counting. Yes, that doesn't matter in that scenario. Should you adjust the risk assessment to include a caveat for the under fives? Yes, I would, because then it shows that you've taken the latest government guidance into account, which is that for parent and toddler groups, it's 15 adults. The children aren't counted within that number. So yeah, that's that one. And then another one, please can you explain again the guidance on more active exercise classes where the attendees move around the room? I think it's quite clear that more active exercise classes can only start from step 3, Lisa, so from 17th of May. She says, just consulting her notes on that. And again, the rule of 6 will apply there. So if you know, I think if you have got a more active exercise group that is going to involve people potentially mingling, to use Lisa's word, I think it's important then you have a discussion with your hirer about how they're going to manage that rule of 6. So, you know, it might be if it's the same people come to the class week in, week out, they put them into, they say, you know, you will be a group of 6 and you will stay in that group for the duration of the class, and you will not mingle with the other groups of 6 in the class. And then that way, because what it's about, if you think about what the government have done with this rule of 6, it's about trying to limit the spread, so that if there is somebody who potentially is carrying COVID, the maximum number of people they could spread it to would be the other 5 people in their rule of 6 group, and that they couldn't spread it amongst the whole class. Obviously, once we get to a situation where you could have more people in a room together, but limited to their particular groups.
And that's really why it's important to make sure that when you are communicating with your hirers around, you know, Zumba teachers will have their organising bodies, yoga teachers will have their organising bodies. They are also giving out advice and guidance to their tutors about how to manage scenarios within their groups. So it's about that dialogue you have with them to make sure that you're confident that they can manage that social distancing aspect while they're in your venue.
Okay. Right, so as I say, any questions on that we can pick up again later. I just wanted to pick up this slide that's on screen now. It's just around parish council meetings, because I know a lot of village halls and other community buildings are sometimes used as the venue for their local parish council meeting. You may or may not be aware that the government issued some emergency legislation that allowed all local authorities to hold their meetings online. But that legislation is about to time out essentially on the 7th of May, and the government's made it clear now that they don't intend to extend that. So from the 7th of May onwards, local authorities, including parish councils, will once again be expected to meet in person rather than online. Now, obviously, that does present some problems for parish councils, because obviously they do have a duty to provide public access to their meetings. And obviously, whilst those meetings have been online, it's been very easy to share a Zoom link and to say, if you want to come along to the parish council meeting, here's the Zoom link to do so. And obviously, it's been a very safe environment then for a meeting to be held. Obviously, after the 7th of May, when parish councils have to go back to meeting in person, there is going to be issues, because obviously they won't be able to hold their meetings indoors in a physical sense from until step 3, which is likely to be the 17th of May. And we know that from, providing the roadmap goes as planned and we don't see a new sort of wave of COVID emerging from the 17th of May, it's likely that, these things we've just been talking about, more indoor activities, will be able to resume. So the current suggestion is that, you might like to delay your local council, any parish council meetings. And obviously, it's a decision for the parish council until after that date, because from that date, the restrictions are likely to be less. But again, there's still this underlying message that we really need to minimise the need for the public to attend meetings until the 21st of June. So it's a little bit contradictory, I guess, the guidance that we're getting at the moment, really around this. And I know sort of the Local Government Association and NALC and people like that are all sort of really sort of lobbying, if you like, for the government to sort of, you know, to think about whether online meetings could continue, because they have, I think for the most part, parish councils have found them a very sort of successful way of sort of conducting their business. And you know, in some respects, it seems a shame to sort of take a backward step and you know, have to make people go out and meet in person, particularly when, you know, some people will have concerns about doing that. I guess the other thing that you might happen in your community buildings each year is you may be the host, or not you the host, but the venue may be the host for the annual parish meeting. And annual parish meetings have to take place each year under the Local Government Act, and the deadline for those meetings taking place is the 1st of June. So again, it would make sense that, you know, your parish council, if they come to you and are looking for a venue for the annual parish meeting, it may well be that the best dates sort of time frame for that is going to be between when step 3 comes into force, which should be the 17th of May, and then the 1st of June. So again, just have a little think about that. I think Lisa mentioned local council elections earlier. So obviously, if there are elections in your area and your hall is used as a polling station, then yes, that can obviously go ahead. Again, the responsibility will be with the person running that election, so the local authority, to make sure that that is done in a COVID safe way. And there is, you know, reams and reams of guidance on how best to do that, and they will come with all the right risk assessments, etc., so that you can be assured that if you hire your hall out for that purpose, it'll be done in a safe way. So I think you can be, you know, that's something you can be quite sure that it's a safe and COVID secure thing to run. Okay, I think the next one might be you, Lisa.
Yeah, I think it is. Okay, so trustees meetings and AGMs. Trustees shouldn't come together for a physical meeting until after the 17th of May. And that's obviously assuming that the timeline doesn't change, but that's the date we're working to at the moment. Until then, it's still a case of relying on your Zoom meetings, your emails and phone conversations in order to conduct your business. The one thing I would say around that is, as we've been saying throughout this last year, if you are taking decisions over Zoom, email or phone, it's really important that you are recording a minute to make sure that you do have those minutes to sign off when you can eventually have a meeting, physical meeting with the committee, but do record decisions that you're taking, you know, in the meantime. Many of you will have postponed your AGM from last year. So if you've got an AGM coming up, obviously before the 17th of May, again, postpone it until after the 17th of May, when you know that that meeting can take place. And I think we're going to have to play it by ear, but again, there will be some restrictions around how the public will attend those meetings. I know that, you know, excuse me, there's never a mad rush for an AGM, and you're lucky if you can get a couple of people and their dog to come along. But it is something that you do need to think about in your planning, is to make sure that you aren't going to, you know, burst your COVID capacity rules that are set out. So when you are planning, when it comes to May, and you are planning your AGM, just think through, you know, if there is a mad rush for people to attend, how are we going to manage that? Should we have a booking system in place in order that we know in advance how many people are likely to attend that event? Okay, so I think I'm back to Alison again.
Okay, so yeah, so this is about test and trace. So just to explain that the regulations for the collection of contact details are still in place and will be, I believe, until step 4. So there's a responsibility that every hirer using the hall has to either collect individual contact details of the people attending their event, or that they should scan the displayed QR code that you as the hall have printed out and put in your hall entranceway. So if you haven't already done so, you can go onto the NHS website and register for a QR code that you can then print out, and you display that in your hall entrance. Then when people come to any event that's taking place in your hall, they scan the code using their phone. If they don't have the ability to do that, so a lot of perhaps older people perhaps wouldn't have a mobile phone that has that ability to scan the QR code, or don't really like doing that kind of thing because sometimes people don't, then the obligation is on the hirer to take down a written note of their contact details, and they must hold on to those for 21 days after their event. Obviously, at that point, if there's been no notification that anybody's developed COVID, those details can just be destroyed, shredded, obviously, hopefully, or whatever. But obviously, if there was an outbreak of COVID that was linked to the people who attended that event, it's important that the hirer, when asked by the NHS, could supply those contact details so that people can be traced and then obviously tested themselves. So I hope that's clear about test and trace. The next one is about what your capacity is, and obviously this becomes quite important, particularly as we start to move towards allowing indoor events again. So really we're thinking about sort of step 3 here. We know around step 2, when we're talking about children's events, what the capacities are. We're talking about 15 adults and then certainly children aren't counted. But once we get to step 3, which we're going to come on and talk about shortly, you'll have to be a bit more certain about what your community building's capacity is. And what's on this screen is a sort of a bit of a ready reckoner, really. So it's about taking your usual seating capacity and reducing that down to 25% of that amount. So, if your normal capacity is 100 people sitting around tables, then I'm afraid, for to be COVID secure, that's going to have to be reduced to 25 people. What I would say, though, is that that's a really, really cautious approach, because what that allows for is 2 meters social distancing between each individual who's attending. But of course, going back to what Lisa said, is that it is quite possible that people might attend events within family groups or as couples or whatever. And in which case, you don't keep 2 meters social distance from your husband or wife. You're a lot closer than that. So if you say your COVID secure capacity is 25% of your usual amount, but then when you talk to your hirer, it's, I don't know, a lot of, I don't know, perhaps a gardening club where it's a lot of husbands and wives comes together as couples, it might be that you can raise that a little bit depending on the type of event, once you have a better understanding of what the actual activity is. I think what this does, having a sort of a stated figure does, though, is it allows you as a hall committee and as the people taking responsibility for those bookings to set a limit that you're quite comfortable with, that gives you that backstop to say to people. So if people have been pushy with you, and I mean, I think we know from some of the queries we've had that people are quite pushy about trying to make you reopen your building and about the activities you will accept. If you have a sort of a stated risk assessment and a policy decision of what your secure capacity is, then at least that sort of gives you a fact to hold on to, that you can then sort of argue back with people. If you then choose to relax that a little bit because of the nature of the activity, that's entirely up to you. But I think this is about, I think I've heard the words abundance of caution, quoted by Boris quite a lot, and I think that's absolutely true. Is that if you take that very cautious approach, you can't be wrong. If you then decide to relax it a little bit because you've got a good understanding of the activity, the hirer is responsible, perhaps the hirer has provided you with a risk assessment of their own, etc. You can then, as a committee, feel comfortable that what you're allowing is going to be okay and isn't going to cause problems within your building. I think I've just seen a question flash up from somebody. Could you just confirm if the capacity is 100, then only 25 allowed, or reduced by 25%? Sorry, yes, no, it's reduced. So it's reduced by, it's 25% of your usual capacity. So if your usual capacity is 100, then I'm afraid 25% of that is just the 25 people. So yeah, does that explain? Sorry if that wasn't clear. It does feel quite stringent at the moment. You know, I think, you know, that's, you know, there's not many halls probably that have got a capacity of 100. So, you know, by reducing that down to just 25, that does feel quite sort of quite strict. But I think, you know, we still are really at quite early stages of sort of coming out of lockdown. And I, you know, personally, I would really sort of encourage a very prudent approach to reopening, a very sort of careful approach, so that you know, we're absolutely sure we're not you know, encouraging a third wave, I think is really what my thinking would be. Okay, where are we at to? I think, activities. Okay, so when this event is over, we're going to be circulating to you all what we're going to call our sort of reopening pack of resources. And within that pack, there is a useful table of all the activities that we can think of that take place in village halls and the start dates that they can take place from. So it's sort of like a little bit of a ready reckoner. You can just look down the list, find the activity that you're thinking about accepting a booking for, and then it will be very clear to you from that which date you can accept that booking for and whether there are any special conditions you need to be thinking about around that. So I just wanted to make a note of that now, because I think, you know, that would be a very useful resource as you start to think about accepting bookings again, about what dates they can take place from. So I just wanted to mention that there. And I think Lisa's now going to talk to you about step 3 onwards.
Step 3, yeah, okay. So after the 17th of May, we all hope that things begin to look a bit more normal and that activities can start taking place in our halls. But obviously, we've still got to be very mindful of having the COVID procedures in place to keep everybody safe. So we're still feeling that it's very important to be cautious for step 3. It's still a long way off, and we still need to, you know, take note in terms of the government's step-by-step plan. They're giving it 5 weeks, aren't they? And then reviewing the position before we go on to the next step. So everything that we're going to say kind of beyond this point in terms of the reopening aspect is based on the fact that the 17th of May, this is what can happen after that, but things could change very short notice. And so I would recommend that any booking that you're taking, the conversation that you're having with your hirer is, we can accept your booking now, but this may change at very short notice and we may have to cancel your booking. One of the things on this slide that has caused some questions is around the controlled indoor event and what that actually means. Now, our interpretation, and we do have to stress our interpretation at this moment because it's not clear from government, our interpretation is that a controlled event is going to be an event that is organised by an official body, so a business or a charity. The problem we've got is we haven't seen the very clear definition of this from government as yet. So from Cambridgeshire Acre, we've asked National Acre if they can seek further clarification from government on what this term actually means. So I think at the moment, you can all work on the basis that a controlled indoor event is an event such as, let me give you an example of, maybe it could be a film show or a performance. And just reflecting back on what Alison was saying about on those events which you have more confidence about because you've talked to the hirer about, this is the sort of thing where you can release that capacity so that you're looking at 50% capacity as opposed to the 25% capacity. So again, understanding your hirer is essential, understanding how that activity is going to be played out. And again, a lot of it is going to depend on family groups, whether you're going to have larger family groups attending, or couples attending, or individuals attending, in terms of these decisions that you're going to make going forward. Right, let's have a look at the next slide, because we're again looking at the 17th of May and what can happen in terms of the extended types of events you've got here. Obviously, the rule of 6 is going to continue. So all of the events that you have up to this point will be, we will need to take that consideration in terms of how your activities play out. We know that guidance, the government is considering the guidance around social contact between families and friends, and that's being reviewed. And we've all seen in the news the talk around vaccine passports, and it's very much hoped that vaccine passports won't impact on village halls and community buildings, that if there is something that comes in like that, that it would be for much larger venues, for theatres and things like, larger organisations, because it's going to be another layer of added complication for you in terms of taking bookings and how that would be managed. So at this point, it's very much about waiting, watching, and understanding the government guidance when it comes out. So as soon as the information is available, we'll be able to pass that on to you. But hopefully this gives you a kind of an idea of what to expect when it comes around to the 17th of May. And also the Ready Reckoner that Alison's already mentioned, it'll be really clear on there in terms of the steps that you can take, whether you can have an activity in step 2 or step 3. So I think, once you've seen that, it'll make everything so much clearer.
Lisa, sorry, just to jump in there, we've just had a question around youth clubs. I guess from the 17th of May. I think there it's about people need to refer to the guidance for out of school activities. Absolutely. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head whether there's any capacity limits in terms of numbers for those?
I don't know. I would have to check that, but what I will do is I will make a note on youth clubs, and I can circulate something after the event on that. So it was capacity numbers, was it?
Yeah, so for children up to the age of 16. So is it the same in terms of the number of adults and the numbers of children? What we'll do is we'll make sure that the table that we send out has got a little note on that very clearly about youth clubs and the numbers involved in that.
I'll double check that, because I'm just not sure on the.
No, I wasn't.
And I don't want to say something and get it wrong, so I'd rather check on that one.
Lovely, will do. Great, thank you.
Okay, so step 4, after the 21st of June, I think, again, it's a little bit difficult for us to predict this far ahead in terms of exactly what it's going to look like, but it is hoped that all of the social contact restrictions would be removed, and that, outdoor events can have more than 30 people, as it says here. Oh, dancing will be permitted again, all the things we've been missing. So, yeah, as more information comes out, we will be able to update you, but this is the position at this time. Okay, so I think we're going to break for coffee at this stage, aren't we, Alison?
I think so. I just think we've done a lot of talking. You've had to do a lot of listening. So perhaps if we can take, it's just before 11 o'clock. So I wonder whether perhaps if we aim to be back about 10 past 11, would that be okay for everybody? If we resume at 10 past 11, that should give you enough time to nip to the loo and make a coffee, and then we'll resume at 10 past, if that's okay. I just want to pick up on a question that came in whilst we were on a break. Just around this capacity limits and things like that. So I have put a response in the chat, but just to make it really clear, I just think it's worth reiterating. that from step 3, so we know that's likely to be the 17th of May, but depending on what happens over the next few weeks. So when you start to obviously run sort of a normal programme of events, essentially from 17th of May, you'll have to work out what your COVID secure capacity is. And as I explained, that should be 25% of your usual capacity. So going back to my example, if your normal seated capacity is 100 people, you'll need to reduce that down to 25 people. So that bit hopefully is fairly straightforward. This complicating factor is around this thing that the government have thrown into the guidance around what's called a controlled indoor event. And why I'm pulling a face at that is simply because the government haven't actually explained to us what a controlled indoor event is. There's no actual definition at the moment. But as Lisa's explained, we think that's likely to be something like a performance event, so a show or something where the reason it will be controlled is because there'll be a defined audience who purchase tickets, and therefore it'll be a sort of a stewarded event. You know, the people who are running it will likely provide sort of marshals or stewards or whatever who will you know, show people to their seats or whatever, and control things. So like, you know, during the interval, for example, you know, they'll say, would row 1 like to use the loos, and then when those people are back, would row 2 like to use the loos, you know. So you can see there'll be a certain amount of control over ensuring that people stay COVID secure in a way that sort of a more private event, like I don't know, a family party. You don't have any control over that, because it would be unreasonable almost to expect a hirer for a family party to sort of implement those sorts of controls. So that's why you have your COVID secure limit, because it's a fewer number of people, and therefore that provides your control. Whereas for a controlled indoor event, you can raise that limit a little bit, because it's likely to be a more formally arranged event with, you know, where you've had that dialogue with your hirer around ensuring that the event is properly stewarded to ensure it remains COVID secure. So hopefully that sort of explains and eliminates any confusion. I think, you know, to a certain extent we're in as much of the dark over what that is as you at the moment, but we're doing our best to try and err on the side of caution in any guidance that we're giving you. And then somebody's literally just put one in, just saying, I may have missed this, but is there any news on when the rule of 6 or 2 households rule will no longer be enforced indoors? And what we can say to that is, from step 4, the assumption is there will be no more controls over that kind of thing, and that all those things will go from step 4, but obviously that's still some way off, and we just don't know whether that is going to be the case. I think Lisa's just brought that slide up again, just to say all legal limits on social contact should be removed at step 4, but, you know, watch this space, I think is the answer to that. So I hope that helps with that. Did anyone have any questions? If people want to sort of put their hands up, or if they've got any particular questions they'd like to ask now. And I'll ask you to unmute yourselves. Graham's waving at me. Hi, Graham from Little Downham.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Slight bit of confusion about the 2 metre distancing.
Yep.
We have a junior theatre group that wants to restart again. And they will probably have anything between 15 and 20 children on the stage at any one time. And there is no way that those children can be 2 metres apart. Does the 2 metre ruling not apply to children?
I don't believe it does. That's right, Lisa, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's the same as for adults. I think what you might need to do, the theatre group would probably need to consider how they can group people, so that they would, as in the schools where they have a group where they're together, and also thinking about how you can reduce the number on the stage at any one time. So it's about that. There is lots of guidance for performance that I'm sure the person who runs the theatre group can look to in order to get you know, clarification about how they should manage that and adapt maybe what they're doing. So I can send you the link for the performance element if that's helpful.
It is one of the appendices within the resource pack that we're going to send everyone. So yeah.
But that would be the thing to do, is for the hirer, because obviously it's whoever's running the organisation, to make sure that they're sticking within the COVID rules for their group. So they would need to seek that guidance in terms of, you know, what measures they need to put in place in order to run a COVID secure performance. And it might be, as I say, restricting the numbers you've got on the stage at any one time. So there is that element of social distancing going on.
Okay, thank you very much. That's most helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anne at Land Beach?
Capacity we had for village halls for kitchens was 2 in a kitchen. So how do we go on when people hiring things for parties? Are we going to say to them, you can't use the kitchen, or they're going to, you know?
So I would suggest you're obviously working out the space that you've got. You've got quite a large kitchen in Land Beach, haven't you?
Yes.
So you can probably socially distance quite adequately at 2 metres with 2 people in your kitchen. It would be making your hirers aware of what the COVID, you know, your COVID rules are. And if the requirement is that you can only allow 2 people in the kitchen at any one time, then the hirer would need to take that into consideration for their booking.
Yeah, and the other thing was, our hall's being used for an election. Are the county council organising people to make sure that the Joe public are kept, you know, to social distancing going in to vote?
So yes. As I understand it, and that the local authorities are doing risk assessments of the buildings, because obviously they will need to keep their staff COVID secure that are working there on the day, and they've got a responsibility to keep the public COVID secure. So it's about talking to your local authority, making sure that you've seen their risk assessment, and you'll have your building risk assessment, which I'm sure they'll probably want to see a copy of as well. So have that dialogue with your local authority.
Thank you.
Lynette at Old Western. Oh, I think you might still be on mute, Lynette. Can't hear you. There should be a button on your screen, Lynette, that says unmute. Oh,
right.
Okay, got it.
I have 2 couples that use the hall twice a week for competition dancing practice. Do they have to wait till step 3 before I can allow them to use it?
No, I believe that they can do that from the 12th of April, from step 2, if they're just one couple at a time in the hall.
Yeah.
It's 2 couples.
I think what they might need to do is they'll have to book it so alternately, or have sessions alternately. I don't think you could have 2 couples in there at that
Okay,
time.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you.
No.
Okay.
Bill and Jean at Quay.
Yeah, hello. At the beginning, we've had our kitchen shut all of the time. So are we safe to open the kitchen again after the 17th of May?
For the election.
So
I'll probably have to open it for the election, because they'll probably want a cup of tea, won't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it would be really harsh to have the kitchen closed, because they'll be there from like 7 in the morning till 10.
That's right.
And that's going to be a really long day if they can't make a cuppa. So,
yeah. So we'll get the caretaker in to clean it all, and that will be okay.
Yeah, and obviously it's about making sure your arrangements with the local authority to say to them that, you know, if you're relying on them being in the building all day, that they then, you know, wipe the surfaces down before they start, wipe the surfaces down when they finish, so that you're giving them clear guidance in terms of what you expect them to do to keep your kitchen and the rest of your building COVID secure. I have heard from another village hall that a local authority is actually booking the facility out to clean it through themselves. So it is, Yeah, so it's worth talking to them about, you know, are they going to do any cleaning prep beforehand, and will they do a clean up afterwards? So, you know, make sure you ask them that question, because I think in some areas they are automatically doing that for village halls.
Well, that'd be worth an inquiry. Thank you very much.
Just to say, Libby from Longstanton, who's the parish clerk at Longstanton, who also runs the community building there, she's just noted that they've already, in terms of the use of as a polling station, they've received a risk assessment from South Cambridgeshire District Council. So certainly, if you're in that district and your building is being used as a polling station, I suggest you should have received that. If you haven't, it might be worth making contact with them. And asking for a copy of their risk assessment if they're planning on using your hall. Right, were there any other questions? Hang on, I've got two screens of people, so I'm going to keep waving. I'm going to flick between them, and if there's anybody else waving. Hello, Janet at Prickwillow.
Hello there. Just a question regarding the elections. We've set our hall up with a table just in the entrance with hand sanitizer and notices for the QR code and all that type of thing. Are we required to have that available for the day of the election? As in, I need to get more hand sanitizer supplies if that's the case, or is that something we're not required to do?
I would have that conversation with the person who's hired the hall for the purposes of using it as a polling station. I assume you've got a contact at the council. I suspect they will come with all their own supplies, because I suspect that's part of their risk assessment process, is that they will supply, you know, everything that they need, and you can just move yours out of the way for that day so you don't run down your stocks.
And do take advice from them about the QR code, because they may not want the QR code used.
I don't think you need to. I think I've read online that for the polling station, because people aren't in there for any duration of time, they don't have to scan the QR code.
And if somebody did go in there and go into isolation, it's going to send everybody into isolation for that day. So, so do check with them what they're you know, what they want, and if they want you to take the QR code down for that day.
Lovely, I will do. Thank you very much.
Anybody else before we move on? I think Francis, that somewhere in March. Hello.
Hello. Can you just go through it again? When you talked of step 3, there's a 25% capacity limit on a church hall. Then I didn't understand, when does the 50% capacity come in, which you then talked of in the next slide? I got a bit confused over that.
Okay, so the 50% only comes into play if you're running something that's called a controlled event. Now, where we're a little bit hesitant ourselves on that is because there is no definition of what a controlled event is as yet. I think we're probably still, you know, we're only just at step 2. You know, Boris has only just given the go ahead for step 2, which is not until the 12th of April. So I imagine, you know, when we get to thinking about step 3, again, Boris will do another television announcement saying we're still meeting all the tests, therefore step 3 is definitely going to go ahead on the 17th of March. And at that point, I think there'll be a lot more guidance then on things like controlled events. As I say, our interpretation is that it's likely to be something like a performance event where people are sitting in rows facing the front, where it's a stewarded event with tickets and people directing people to do, you know, to do certain things at certain times, and therefore that's the control element. So and at that point it's possible that you'll be able to increase your capacity from 25% up to 50% because of those elements of control. But I say we'll circulate more guidance on that when we get it. I mean, that's all we can promise at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can understand the principle. Between that and a coffee morning. Okay.
Brilliant. Okay. I think Janet, have you got another question?
Yes, I have. Sorry. I just thought of it on the back of the slide that was just on there. Regarding the types of events that can run from May, we have a choir group who meet, and I know there have been restrictions in the past on singing. Is there any guidance around them meeting?
I think, again, there is, we're waiting for final guidance in terms of what can happen with choirs. Let me make a note of that and get some information to you. on the choirs.
Yeah, according to our table, it does say choirs and singers can take place from step 3, but there's no actual information, no detailed information on whether there's any restrictions involved in that. So yeah, we might just have to wait until we've got that to pass that on to you.
So it might be a case around, obviously, it'll be the social distancing measures, I should imagine, and the amount of people that you can have in the room at any one time.
Yeah, that's useful. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else got a question before we move on? I can't see any hands waving. If anybody is, shout now or forever hold your peace. No, I think we're okay to move on. So I'm going to put... Right, okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is, obviously, you're thinking about reopening now, and you obviously really at some point you've got to actually take some practical steps. So these are the things that we're thinking that you can usefully be doing now, whether you're planning on accepting bookings for events from the 12th of April, so your sort of children's indoor activities, or whether you're thinking, do you know what, we're just going to hold off until the 17th of May. But at some point you need to think about reopening, and these are some of the things that you need to think about. In the reopening pack that we're going to send you after this session, one of the things that's in there, it's Appendix A, is a reopening checklist. And what it is a really helpful checklist of things you can work through to make sure you're ready to reopen. And it talks about things like, talking to your hirers. I mean, I think we've probably said this more than once this morning, but actually, you could actually do some useful consultation with your hirers now to find out what their expectations are, what their requirements are, whether they're thinking they're going to need to sort of, as Lisa mentioned, perhaps they might need to break their sessions down into 2 parts, or so they can sort of work within your COVID secure limits, things like that. So it's useful to understand what your hirers are anticipating. Are they planning on coming back? We know that a lot of activities have moved online quite successfully. I don't think there's any guarantee that people will definitely be coming back. So I think it's about having those conversations with people now so that you know how to plan for your reopening. Talk about speaking with your insurance company. They may well have special conditions they expect you to put in place, things they want you to do before you reopen. So it's worth having a conversation with them to be sure about those things. I think there's things that, probably if you think about it, in the last year would have happened as a matter of course if you'd been open. So things like fire risk assessments, health and safety assessments. A lot of you may have had some work done on your halls whilst you've been closed, and those things may well need some updating as a result of that. So I think it's absolutely vital, particularly around fire safety, that you look at those assessments and make sure they're still current and accurate. Just have a think about Legionella. Some of you may well have been managing that risk whilst your halls have been closed by going in and running taps and things like that, showers, things like that. But, there is a small risk from that. One of the resources we'll be sending you is a fact sheet on that. And, we would obviously recommend that you follow that guidance, and if you do have hot water systems. I think if you've got any staff, and that could be paid staff, or it could be volunteer staff, I think it's important as a good employer, whether you're formally an employer or not, to have a conversation with those people and make sure they're, how they feel. They may have their own concerns, and you need to understand what they are so that you can make sure you address them. I think that is an important thing to do. And the other thing to do, which we're now going to come on to in a bit more detail, so those are sort of some of the really sort of quite practical steps you can be getting on with now. But the other main thing you need to think about now is ensuring that your building meets the COVID-19 secure guidelines. And Lisa's just helpfully brought up her slide summarising those the key points that fit within those guidelines. And they are really relatively simple things that you need to do. So it talks about undertaking the COVID risk assessment, minimising contact with people who are unwell, the good hand hygiene and the good respiratory hygiene, the cleaning practices you need to observe, and then the need for still maintaining social distance. And we're going to come on and look at those in a bit more detail. But I think the important thing about being COVID secure is that if you work through all those steps and you have the right measures in place to make sure you are COVID secure, you can then display a poster, and again that's something we supply you with, that says that your venue is COVID secure. And one of the things that does is it will help give people confidence in coming back into your building. You know, I think it's important to realise that, you know, a lot of people have shielded for very much of the last 12 months. People have got used to doing things in their own homes with a much smaller number of people, if anybody at all. They've got used to doing things online, participating with things online that can sort of make, you know, some people have found that sort of quite a sort of comforting thing, because you're not actually having to go and meet people and see people face to face. And suddenly we're saying to people, we're open again, our village hall is open, come and do your usual things here. And people are going, oh, do you know what, I'm not sure that I really want to, you know, and I'm not sure whether it's safe yet. So it's one of your responsibilities as a management committee is to help people feel confident, to help them know that you've done everything you can to protect them, and that they're the people whose events they're attending have equally done the same. And I think with that, you know, people will then build their confidence to sort of participate again. And obviously that's what we all want to see. You know, we know that community buildings are, that, you know, in most communities are these sort of the one sort of meeting place where people can come together, and they're absolutely vital for sort of providing that sort of community cohesion and making people feel not just an individual but part of something, part of your community. So it is important that people feel your building is safe, and that they want to go there again. So we're going to look at some of those things that we need to do. So the first one of those is about the COVID-19 risk assessment. Hop on to the next slide. Lovely. Okay, so some of you who made an attempt at reopening last summer when we were between lockdowns may have already undertaken a COVID-19 risk assessment. We did provide a template at the time. That template that we provide has been updated very slightly, obviously now to reflect the new rule of 6 2 households rule. So what I would say is, if you haven't done one before, you know, now's the time to do one. If you have done one before, you really do now need to review it in line with the new guidance that's out there regarding rule of 6. I think it's really important that, you know, you don't rush to reopen until you've worked through all those issues. You know, doing your COVID risk assessment may well throw up some things about, you know, have you got very narrow corridors? Have you got, you know, only got 1 or 2 loos? You know, how are you going to manage people if you have bigger events? How are you going to manage some of those things? Somebody's mentioned previously about using the kitchen, you know, so you just need to think through all those potential areas, or those potential risk areas where there's a potential for people to come into closer contact, and how you're going to manage those. And our risk assessment template will help you do that, help you think that through. Important to say that obviously if you do have staff, that consultation, that risk assessment should be done in consultation with them, because obviously they are going to be some of the people who are most at risk. So it's very important that you share that with them, get their feed into that assessment, and then also obviously once that risk assessment is done, that you then share a copy of that risk assessment with your hirers, because that will then give them confidence, and also it will start to get them to think about their own risk assessment. And again, we can provide a template that you can share with your hirers. You may decide that you want all your hirers to provide you with a risk assessment to show that they have thought through their COVID risks associated with their activity. And as I say, we've got a template that you can use with them and ask them to fill it in, and then return that to you. And then in turn, that then provides you with the sort of reassurance that the people you're hiring your venue to have thought through those risks associated with their activity. I mean, I think just perhaps to say that risk assessment, you know, it's not about sort of, you know, it can feel very sort of bureaucratic, you know, it's not about that. It's about taking a very common sense approach to it. You know, it's not about creating reams of paperwork. It doesn't have to be 29 pages plus. It just needs to be that, you know, if anybody says to you, you know, have you thought this through? You can hand on heart say, yes, we have. And, you know, this is where we've articulated it. And this is as a committee, this is what we have all agreed. You can certainly delegate conducting that risk assessment to one person if you wish, but remember it is your collective responsibility as a management committee to make sure you've got a robust risk assessment in place. Okay, I think, is that all I need to say on risk assessments, Lisa? I think you know, when people see the risk assessment template, hopefully it will all make sense. So I think that's probably all I need to say, and I'll let Lisa move on to the next few slides.
So we're looking at minimising the contact with individuals who are unwell here. So you'll need to display a poster at the entrance requesting display a poster at the entrance requesting the people do not enter if they feel unwell. So you're making it very clear to people, you know, coming up to your building, that if they do feel unwell, please don't come in, because we want to keep this building COVID secure. The last point on this slide mentions about somebody being taken ill in a facility. There's been lots of questions being asked about do you still need to have a separate room to keep someone isolated. That's no longer a requirement to have a separate room set up, but we still recommend that you have something where you can take somebody to an office space or a small meeting room or somewhere like that, so that there is somewhere where they can go just until they're collected by, you know, ambulance if required, or if they're just being escorted home because they're feeling unwell. So more in the same way as you would you know, treat that with any other illness. If someone was taken ill on the premises, you don't need to have we gave quite a prescriptive suggestion last time in terms of the room that you had to have and the kit that you had to have available. So that's kind of been scaled down now, and it's not felt that that's necessary. The bit that is still important is the fact that you do need to do a deep clean process if someone is taken ill at the facility, and we will provide a link for you which will give you the details on how to clean a non-health setting, a non-healthcare setting facility. So basically what you're looking at is making sure that in advance you've got PPE and you know, bin bags and everything available in stock, so that if it does happen, you can immediately kick in and do the deep clean and know that the facility is okay to reopen, you know, within a certain amount of hours afterwards. What you do have to do with the waste, it doesn't have to be disposed of in any special manner. The waste can simply just be bagged up. So any disposable items that you've got, like the cleaning cloths, sponges, whatever you've used, rubber gloves, all would be put into a bin bag. You'd store that for 72 hours. After that period, it's felt that the virus is no longer active after 72 hours, so you can then just dispose of the bin bag in your general waste. It's really important, I think, to think of these things ahead rather than waiting for the incident to happen and then try and get the PPE that's required, that might not be in stock, that, you know, all of the other ifs and buts that could arrive. So I think as part of your risk assessment, think about having, you know, the rubber gloves, the cloths, the extra cleaning materials, whatever it is you need to put as a kind of a kit together. Make sure you've got it ready to use. Okay, so we're suggesting, again, making sure that you're displaying reminders about hand washing and good hygiene. That's not going away, I don't think, anytime soon. Wearing of face coverings and social distancing. So the government mantra about, you know, face, hands and space. Make sure you're displaying the posters. And this is certainly, as we said earlier, this is certainly going to be required until the 21st of June at the earliest. And of course, we don't quite know what's going to happen beyond that. As we're coming round to next winter, we're already starting to hear the government talk about, you know, these measures might need to come back in place for the winter, the coming winter. So make sure your posters are up, make sure you're keeping people aware, and of course we'll make sure that we include as many of these as possible in the resource pack for you. If there are specific ones that, that you would like to display that you've seen and you can't find, just give us a ring, and we will try and source them for you to make sure that you've got them available. Okay, so one of the things that I was certainly asked very early on was about what cleaning materials do I need to purchase? Do I need to go and buy professional cleaning materials? What we were told by government guidance is that using supermarket products is absolutely okay. What you're looking for is something that's going to kill viruses and bacteria. And any of these can be found on the supermarket shelves. In fact, I think probably using, if you're asking the hirers to do an element of your cleaning within your facility, by having the supermarket products, which people are going to be more familiar with and familiar with how you use them, is probably the best thing to do. Anything that you can pick up off the shelf, like Zoflora or any of the other makes that you can get that clearly state on their packaging that they kill 99% of viruses and bacteria, and many of them are starting to advertise the "we even kill COVID" kind of scenarios. When you're asking people to do the clean, I would seriously think about leaving instructions for people to make sure that they are clear in terms of what your expectation is around this. So if you have staff cleaning your facility, you could display a poster in your building which says that when your staff last cleaned the building, which as Alison has already said about giving people reassurance and confidence, people knowing that they're coming into your building and that it's being cleaned effectively by your staff, and seeing, it was cleaned today at 7 AM or whatever your poster says, it gives people that assurance that the building has been through, it's a clean environment for me to come into, and increases their confidence in using your facility. So again, think about how you can manage that within your realms of having staff or volunteers available to do that work. It's perfectly okay for trustees, as we said in the last round of the lockdown and the unlocking, it's perfectly okay for trustees to discharge the responsibility of cleaning to hirers. And we'll just pick up on some points around that we're kind of reflecting on from what we've learned so far. I would say that it's important to inform hirers of the surfaces that you want them to clean before, so making them aware that you want them to clean tabletops and chairs, and when it comes to electrical sockets and things, that you want them to spray the product on the cloth and wipe an area down, rather than spraying on the actual item itself and causing all sorts of electrical functions. Don't assume people know how you want them to clean your building. So leaving a checklist for people might be a really useful way of keeping them informed about what it is you actually expect them to do. So you might have one cleaning routine for your staff where they're dealing with the larger kitchen appliances, the fridges and whatever, the floors, all fall under your professional cleaners or your staff that you have coming in, or indeed your volunteers or your trustees doing those jobs. But then when you've got the individual hirers booking for their sessions, just be clear about what it is that you want them to do for their session. So, the wiping down of the door handles, the chairs, the tables. Because I think people could get quite lost in the sense of what it is you actually need them to do in order to keep the building clean. Yeah, I think I've probably covered everything on that slide, and we can pick up, if you've got any questions around cleaning, we can always pick up those questions with you afterwards anyway. One of the things that, especially if your building is getting busy, one of the things that you'll need to think about managing is checking the levels of your sanitizer and your cleaning materials on a regular basis. So you're going to need to factor in either a trustee or a volunteer popping in throughout the day just to make sure that your entrance and exit points have got, sufficient sanitizer to see them through for the next few hours. Make sure your cleaning materials are replenished on a regular basis, as well as all of the other the day-to-day stuff you do, like checking the toilet rolls and things like that. You don't want to leave it to chance that somebody arrives at your building and then there's no sanitizer available for them. As groups start to return to your facilities, no doubt they will be either bringing back the equipment that they've previously stored in your building. Thinking about organisations like Cubs and Scouts, they tend to have lots of boxes of craft materials and all sorts of things that they store at village halls. Some of them may have taken them away during the closed period, but as they start to come back, you need to think about, again, how those items will be stored. Making sure that they're clean, making sure that the group that uses them is well informed about the practice of cleaning after they've put items away, and making sure that there's no cross-contamination between groups' items as well. So working out a way how they can be stored quite clearly individually of each group. And in some cases you're short of storage space, and so this can be, can potentially cause a problem. So work with the hirer about, do they need to store all of the things in the building, or can they take some away at the end of their session? And my last point on this slide is about it being really important to make sure that your booking secretary leaves enough time between the bookings to ensure that, that people have enough time to complete that clean that you're asking them to do. And it's about making sure that they've got enough time to complete the clean and to leave the building and to leave the car park before the next session starts. So plenty of flexibility in that. Ultimately, it's probably going to reduce the amount of hours that you can hire out for, but it's important you haven't got groups crossing in the corridors and, one still cleaning as the others arrive. So working again with the hirers and allowing plenty of time is going to be really, really important. Okay, so some of the, a reminder of some of the points around social distancing and catering and things like that. Arrangements for catering, as we've already mentioned from the question that Anne posed, much of it will depend on the size of your facility. And as we know, all village halls are coming in all different shapes and sizes. So you'll need to work out whether you can manage more than one person in your kitchen at a time. But the overriding message there is about making sure that social distancing is maintained at all times, and that clearly people are wearing face masks at all times in kitchen areas. What you might want to do for ease, in terms of not having that responsibility of having to make sure that the kitchen is being cleaned after every booking, is for short meetings you might want to suggest to people that they bring their own bottle of water or their own flask of tea or something, and then maybe for longer events then you could open up your kitchen. But I think it's about being practical and working with the hirer in terms of understanding what they need and the impact that it's going to have, the fact that the additional cleaning you're going to have. When you're asking the hirer to wipe down, it's really important to make sure that you're leaving them, again, a list so that they fully understand what they need to do. Work surfaces, wiping down the kettle is really important, or the hot water boiler that you've got, because obviously it's regularly touched. So you'll need to make sure that obviously hot surfaces, people understand what they've got to do around hot surfaces, making sure that the taps are wiped down, door handles, and recommending that people bring their own tea towels as well, because nothing harbours germs more than a tea towel, does it? So what you don't want is, you know, one group leaving and the next group coming in and everybody's using that tea towel. So think about how you can make it as safe as possible for people to use your kitchen if you decide to open it. Again, when you're thinking about serving from your kitchen, most kitchens have either a hatch or something like that at village halls, or for your coffee morning. So think about, would it be easier for the event to have a pre-ordering system? So maybe when people are arriving, they're actually saying that they want a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, so that it's pre-ordered, you know the table they're sat at, you're avoiding those queues at the kitchen hatch, which, if you're socially distancing at 2 meters, is going to be really difficult to accommodate a very long queue. So it might be easier to think through, well, could we do the table service, and could we make sure that we've got a system in place to think about pre-ordering, you know, your refreshments, you know, in advance. It might take a bit of thinking through in terms of the practicality of it, but I'm just kind of floating that as an idea and an option to try and make things a bit easier for everybody. But what you're trying to do is avoid those pinch points of people getting all crushed up together. Okay, so then we've got a break for discussion. The questions that are posed on this slide were some of the questions when we asked everybody to book. We asked for questions, and what we've tried to do with this presentation is incorporate the questions that you asked within the presentation. So I hope we've successfully done that. And these are some of the questions that people put forward. So if you've got anything else, you know, please ask.
Trying to see if I can see any hands.
I can't see a lot of people on my screen, so
no, I'm not sure anybody's got their hand up at the moment. So hopefully that means we did a good job and we've incorporated everybody's questions.
Hopefully.
Oh, hello, Helen. Hi, Helen. William, Colin. Long time no see.
Yes, I was just going to ask. You know, you were talking about you've done an updated risk assessment.
Yes.
Are you sending that out after
yes.
this?
Yeah, the template will go around to everybody, so anybody who's got an existing risk assessment can just have a quick side by side with the new template and just make sure that there's nothing that yours misses. So yeah,
lovely. Cheers.
Okay, righty-ho. Okay, I think we'll then move on, if that's okay. Oh, hang on, no, I've just seen one spotted coming in on the chat, so let's just pick this one up. As general guidance, should masks be kept on all times unless it impedes the activity, e.g. doing an exercise class or singing, or can they remove if not moving around the hall? The guidance is that, yeah, face coverings should be kept on at all times unless there's a strong reason for them to be removed, i.e. you're eating or drinking, or you're doing some, I don't know, using a very sharp knife and there's a danger of you chopping your fingers off because your glasses are steaming up. Yes, so yes, I'm afraid it is a case of keeping them on. Okay, so I was just briefly going to touch on your hire agreement. As you know, we strongly advise that all halls adopt the ACRE model hire agreement, because that's a document that's been run past a solicitor, the ACRE solicitor. So we know that when we offer that hire agreement to you, it's modelled on very best practice and is a sort of proper legal document. I'm afraid that's why there's a small charge for it. However, with COVID, we are suggesting that you should be issuing some additional COVID-19 specific additional hiring conditions that we expect your hirers to stick to when they hire your building. The reason for this is obviously then it's a contractual arrangement between you. You specify to them what you want them to do. And whether that's around cleaning or, you know, in observing the capacity limits we've talked about, things like that. And then because that's a contractual arrangement, because they have to sign to say that they will stick to those hiring conditions. If they don't, then obviously the liability lies with them, not with you. So what we've done is again, it's another template that you'll be supplied with these additional hiring conditions that we're suggesting you put in place with your hirers who hire your hall between now and obviously you know, until all the COVID restrictions are dropped, hopefully at step 4, but for now obviously those things are in place, and we think it's important that you make sure that you have those arrangements with your hirers so that they're very clear on what you're expecting them to do, and as Lisa's just said, you know, if you're expecting them to do the cleaning, you need to be very clear about what it is you want them to do, rather than leaving it for them to guess and potentially getting things wrong. Okay, next thing. And again, as Lisa says, you know, we've talked about what the hirer's responsibilities are, you know, what the hall's responsibilities are and what the hirer's responsibilities are. Your responsibility as a hall management committee is to make sure that the hirers know what the rules are that you're expecting them to stick to. The hirer is then responsible for implementing those rules. So, you know, if you hire your hauler, they've signed your additional hiring conditions saying that they will stick to something, but then there's a riot or a party, or, you know, something mad goes on, that's their responsibility. It's not your responsibility. And obviously putting those hiring conditions in place does make sure that hirers then stick to what you want them to stick to. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide, Lisa. I'm just conscious of time.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we've mentioned that we're going to circulate this reopening pack to you after this event. This slide just summarises everything that you're going to get. So basically it's an information sheet that sort of hopefully summarises everything that we've sort of been through this morning, but then all those templates that we've talked about, checklists and templates, risk assessments, etc. You will get a copy of those in a format that you can then adapt for your community building. And then those last 4 bullet points just on the right hand side are the various posters and things that we talked about that again will be useful for you to display at your hall. Thank you. I just wanted briefly to touch on the financial support that's available for community buildings. There's a new grant scheme that's coming into place very shortly, well, from April the 1st. It's replacing the local restriction support grants that some of you have benefited from previously. This Restart grant, you can read about it on your screen there, but essentially it's more free money that's available for any community building that pays business rates. So if you pay business rates, you will be eligible for these grants. The list of eligible businesses very, very clearly states village halls, scouts huts, pavilions, things like that. So depending on your rateable value will depend on the funding you receive. Funnily enough, we've had some feedback from some community buildings. They actually feel a bit guilty because of the amount of financial support they've benefited from over the last 12 months. And I think, you know, Lisa and I would both say, do not feel guilty about accepting this money. This is money that you as a business, which is basically what a village hall is, are entitled to. You do not know whether your hires are going to resume at the same level that you were you know, obviously, you know, getting hires at pre-COVID. You do not know what additional expenditure you might have. You know, we've talked a lot about cleaning. A lot of you might be worried about how you're going to manage that. If you have benefited from some of this grant funding, there is nothing to stop you using that to pay for professional cleaners or to employ a cleaner for, you know, whilst this whole COVID pandemic goes on. You know, don't think you have to bear that burden yourselves as volunteers. If you've received this money, think about how you can spend it wisely. It's not necessarily about, you know, going out and blowing it all on a extension or a refurbishment, although there's no reason why you can't do that, but it is about thinking, how do we best use this money to support this village hall in the longer term? So please do think about that. As at this morning, the only district councillors who actually have got their applications for this new grant live are East Cambridgeshire and Fenland. Each district is different, unfortunately, because it's done because the money is filtered from government down through the districts. Each one does it slightly differently. Some of them will contact you, some of them you will need to apply. South Cambs, Huntingdonshire and Peterborough are all saying that their portal for applications will be opening soon. So what I would say to you is go onto your district council website for whichever district you're in, look up it's usually under the COVID information, and then there's a bit that says business support grants. Just keep an eye on that over the next few days. Most of them seem to be saying that you will, they'll be open sort of in the next week or so, because they want to get the money out the door to businesses by the middle of April. But obviously it does say that they will be open for applications until 30th of June. The other thing to say is that obviously if you don't pay business rates, and obviously that applies to things like church halls and things like that, there is, as Lisa's brought this slide up, this is additional restrictions grant. There's another sort of tranche of funding for that. So if you don't get money through the Restart grant, you may well be eligible for this additional restrictions grant. And what I would say to you is have that conversation with your district council. There should be somebody there in their economic development department of the district council who looks after businesses. There should be an email address. If you can't find the person to speak to, come to us and we'll do a little bit of digging, see if we can find you an actual named person to speak to. But it's worth having that conversation, and certainly worth applying to the additional restrictions grant to see if you can get some money to support. If your community building has had to close over the last year, it's had complete loss of income, but you're now obviously faced with additional costs in terms of, cleaning, things like that, getting going again, then, it's right that you should receive some money to support you to do that. So we'll back you up with that and try and help you find the right people to approach to do that if it's not obvious on the district council websites. Okay. Okay, I think we're coming to the end. So this was a slide I just wanted to just pop up to say that obviously this training, obviously there's been quite a lot of work gone into sort of pulling this together, and we have to thank the funder who has allowed us to do that, which is Cambridgeshire Community Foundation. They have a coronavirus recovery fund, and we've benefited from some funding from that's allowed us to not only put on this training, but also we're going to be running a series of events over the next few months. So there'll be, unfortunately, you'll be seeing more of me and Lisa quite frequently. Some of that's going to be around how you can market your village hall better, because we think certainly you might need some help in getting people to realise your village hall is open again, that it's safe and that it's a good venue for community activities. So we want to help you with that. We know that recruiting new trustees is always problematic, so we might offer some training on that. And then the other things we're thinking about is how you can connect better with your community and how you can get more people to step forward and set up new community activities. Unfortunately, it's always the same old people, isn't it, who step forward and do things. How can we inspire new community members to come and try setting up new community activities and new groups that could take place in your village hall? So those are some of the things that we will be letting you know about in due course. We'll let you know when that's ready. The other thing that I wanted to highlight to you is the coffee morning programme that Lisa runs throughout the year. I know a lot of you do come to those meetings and find them incredibly helpful, just to chat with other village hall trustees. So when we send around the reopening pack, I'll make sure Lisa includes a link to where you can find out the details of those events, so you can get yourselves booked onto those, because it would be lovely to have some more people join those, and I'm absolutely sure you'd find them useful. So I think that brings us to the last slide. So really, this is sort of we can probably stop sharing now.
Stop sharing.
And we can just sort of open up the floor to you if you've got any more sort of final questions. Can I see any hands? Oh, it's all gone deathly quiet. Don't think anybody's waving. Are you telling me we've answered all your questions, or are you all just stunned into silence?
Too much to take in.
Hi, Leslie at Hilton. Hi, you're waving.
Hi, sorry, I missed a little bit practically at the beginning to say, are you sending out a recording?
Yes, we will do. Yes, you
are. So you'll send it to my email address, and then I'll be able to forward it to other trustees.
We'll send you a link, and then you can pick it up on YouTube. Anybody can pick it up on YouTube that you share the link with. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been so informative.
Good. Thank you all for your comments. I'm just having a scroll back. I think most of them probably just say thank you, but I'm just making sure there's no questions that we've missed. Doesn't look. I'm really sorry about the person who's hungry. I'm hungry too. Clearly lunchtime. Bear with us. Thank you for those who've had to leave.
Paul from Yelling wants to ask a question, Alison.
Go on then, Paul, while I'm scrolling.
You're muted, Paul.
No, really, I was just saying thank you very much. It's been very helpful. That's all I want to say.
Oh, good.
So you're very welcome. I mean, I think the thing to say is, you know, somebody said about people being very cautious about reopening is, you know, yeah, please do be cautious. Please don't feel you have to rush into anything. There is no obligation on you to absolutely rush ahead and you know, be reopen, you know, dead on the 12th of April. You need to take your time, be absolutely sure you've worked through that COVID secure checklist and the reopening checklist, that you as a committee, don't put it all on one person, as a committee, you're all entirely comfortable with reopening. Remember that we're here. We're happy to take any questions at any time. You can email us, you can ring us, or whatever. We'll happily jump on a Zoom with any committees who want an extra conversation. So yeah, please don't be scared. You know, at some point we're all going to have to bite the bullet and go out back into the real world. But you know, I think, you know, we can do it. I'm sure we can. It's just taking our time and you know, supporting each other through that process. Anything else you wanted to say, Lisa?
No, I'm fine, thank you. Thank everybody for coming along. It's been a bit of a long session.
Yeah, thank you for bearing with us.
There was just so much information to pack in. So.
Lovely. Okay, we hope to see you all again very, very soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks very much, Lisa.
Bye. Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye.
Many thanks.